I've never really viewed myself as particularly talented. I've viewed myself as, slightly above average in talent. And where I excel is ridiculous, sickening work ethic. While the other guy's sleeping, I'm working. While the other guy's eating, I'm working.
So today is day 3, and as you've already seen, I've kind of cracked on already with the sketches. Now that process is never finished, you're always doing sketches, but I think I've kind of deserved a coffee, so that's why I'm going to go and do that. I love Athens. I could walk around here all day, but it's just too hot. It's like 36 degrees, and I've not experienced heat like this since Dubai. Oh, it is way too hot out there. You can see the benefits of sectioning off and modularizing different parts of the flow, and what that essentially allows us to do is to create a really seamless file management for now and later on in the project. But what it also does is it allows us to focus on specific areas in isolation. So for example, if you look at section 1B, for example, which is the onboarding process, that essentially revolves around requiring the user to do as little as possible. And that's what the main objective of the onboarding process is to make it super seamless. You almost don't want it to be there, because if you're creating barriers at the beginning of your application, you're less likely to get them to actually go through and see where they can obtain value within the application. So that's essentially part of the flow that needs to be optimized for minimum interaction. But let's say, for example, you look at section 2A, you want to do the complete opposite to what you're doing in section 1B, and that's because you want them to explore. So you're trying to optimize that experience for the maximum amount of clicks and the maximum amount of engagement for that part of the application. So you have two completely contradicting objectives for two different parts of the application. And this is where the modularization of the flow comes really into play, because you can almost just focus on that part in isolation, and that's one of the main benefits of doing this. A lot of the sketches here have the notches for the iPhone, and that's essentially done as a reference to the fact that I will be designing this for the Apple iOS 13 human interface guidelines. And that's what I'm going for primarily, because it allows me to stretch my legs. It's been a little while since I've designed an app for iOS, and I think this will be a great project to pick up those skills again and to kind of do my research on what's new and what's exciting in terms of Apple stuff. of the sketches, in fact, most of the sketches, I've really considered content as the primary factor, not just from what we did on the data map in episode 1, but also in terms of imagery and video. And there's a lot of comments on these sketches which refer to imagery and video, and I guess this is part of the project which I haven't really discussed yet, which is content. But let's go and talk a little bit about content, because that's something I haven't discussed yet, so come with me. When it comes to content, I think I've definitely got an advantage here, and the reason is because I've got a backlog of about 2.5 years worth of video and photography content, and also a lot of data that I've collected in a way which is very specific to particular regions and particular areas of a location or a destination. So I won't go too much into that right now, because I think that it's pretty self-explanatory, and if you want to see some of the video and some of the photography content that I've collated over the last few years, or at least a very small amount of it, you can check out my Instagram, or you can check out my Unsplash or my other YouTube videos for some of to give you a little bit of an idea of the stuff that I've got. I guess the next stages would be to create a mock-up or preliminary mock-up which collates all of this together. So the sketches that we did, the ideation, the kind of data mapping that we did, and the flow and everything is just to kind of pull it all together and to piece it into a design which really nails home the initial goal that I set out to achieve. So it's a little bit later in the day now. In fact, it's quite a bit later in the day now. But I've managed to get some initial mock-ups together of section 2A, which is the kind of exploration page. And what I've managed to do is kind of utilize some of that content that I was talking about, so the photography that I've captured across my travels. And it feels really good actually to have some of my photography in there, and because it's sometimes when you're a designer and you're working on a project, you often work with like stock photography, so it's good to see like a consistent creative style that maintains throughout, so that's really cool. But besides that, I think what I've got so far is there's a lot more that we could do in terms of typography. I think the typography is a little bit off. Option 1 that I've gone for, again, the photography really stands out, but I just don't think the type is big enough. I think it just doesn't feel quite there. I feel like there's probably a lot more space that could be utilized. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like there's much information on there. In fact, all of them feel pretty plain. And I think what's probably going to be a good idea to do is to try and mock up like more than just one section, to give myself a much better idea about where we're going to go with this. But yeah, I've kind of loosely used the native design principles of Apple's human interface guidelines. I need to revisit that because I don't know, some of these styles seem a little off. And then what I also need to do is, as I'm using Figma, and it doesn't matter what design tool you use, you can use Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD, whatever suits you in that respect. I'm a recent convert to Figma, so feels good to kind of be using that a little bit more extensively. But what I do need to do is change it from iPhone X and make it more so it can fit my my iPhone 7, because at the moment that's what I want to be able to view the designs as I'm designing, because at that point you can get a much better feel for the application. It's really important to be able to have a feel of the design on the device, especially for mobile applications. So yeah, I think what I'm going to do now, because it is quite late, I'm going to kind of wrap it up for today, and then pick this up first thing in the morning and take it from there. But yeah, it'll be great to get some more feedback on this video series. I don't know if, you know, something that I've kind of realized today is maybe I'm not going into enough detail on certain parts, and maybe I'm going into too much detail in certain parts. So it'd be really, really awesome to hear your feedback, not necessarily on the you know, on everything actually, but more about the content and which I'm sharing. What do people want to hear? What do people want to know about the design process? And you know, I'm sure there's loads of stuff I've missed out, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions around certain things. So it'd be awesome to get some feedback. But yeah, stay tuned and wait for the next one tomorrow, and hopefully it floats your boat. But yeah, until then, catch you tomorrow. Peace.